I could barely breathe and still had 3,400 feet to go to reach the summit of Mount Kilimanjaro. It was 1 a.m. Tanzania time, and with headlamps on, we ventured out in nearly 0-degree weather with more butterflies and food in our bellies after spending 6 days on the mountain, sleeping in tents with no showers. As a slight germaphobe, no showers is extremely uncomfortable. The following 8 hours or so were spent crying and trying not to die, mostly, fearing and cheering, and climbing and surviving barely. I remember as we ventured on that final leg of our summit, how many times I heard in my mind one of my favorite quotes by Neil Donald Walsh. Life begins at the end of your comfort zone. I remember thinking, wow, this is absolutely the second most uncomfortable I have ever been. You see, me reaching even that milestone, I credit it to a picture of Sipao that I had hanging on my backpack. The invitation that God sent me to take this mission and climb this mountain for him, I knew I had to accept, because that was the only way I was going to venture out of my comfort zone to change his life. Sipao at the time was a 5-year-old, amazing Maasai little boy. And me taking that climb meant that I would reset the circle of poverty that him and his family had been in for generations. With the fundraising from that climb, that meant that he would have access to an education, the nutrition, and the medical attention that he needed from age 5 until he graduated high school. That was the very best chance of him climbing out of poverty. I knew that I could not let him down. I remember watching the newly reminted 3D version of The Lion King with my granddaughter, Chloe, who was 2.5 years old at the time. And in that opening iconic scene where the clouds part to reveal that mountain, she would run up to the TV and say, "Mima, that's where you're going, right?" I remember promising myself that I could not let her down. I was very clear on what I wanted to accomplish, and more importantly, why I wanted to accomplish it. For anyone in here who hasn't figured it out yet, your what and your why, please start working on that right away. Please believe in your dreams and believe in your ability to achieve them. We've heard a lot about that today. The fact that we are here in this room with Robin celebrating what one woman is all about is proof to any doubters that dreams do come true. Surround yourself with dreamers. Surround yourself with people who believe as much in your dreams as they believe in their own. Surround yourself with people who set your soul on fire. And trust me, the moment that that seed of a dream is planted in your heart, God has already given you everything that you need to achieve it. All you have to do is get out of your own way. Make sure that you are surrounding yourself with the right people. We heard a little bit about that earlier. Jim Rohn said, you are the average of the 5 people you spend most of your time with. The first time I read that, I almost fell out of my chair. I thought, holy crap, I am in trouble. Not coming from a place of judgment, but we had 9 cousins who got married in 1987. That was a very expensive year for our family. But you know what happened? We all got married at the same time. We all bought our first homes, more or less same price. We were all building our careers. We were all buying the same kind of minivan as we started having our children. And what happened was that was fertile ground for that comfort zone of averageness, and that breeds complacency. There was no one up here saying, hey, there's more for you. Dream bigger. There are more lives to change. There's more impact to make. And we need to be surrounded with people who are going to challenge us to go there. to get out of that comfort zone that we've heard about a couple of times today as well. You see, anybody meditate in here? Right? So they always talk to us about how it's important to focus on our breathing in order to meditate effectively. Now, I'll be honest, when you're on that mountain, at that elevation, the last thing I wanted to do was focus on my breathing. Because the air is so thin that even at a snail's pace, this is us running up there, it feels like you're going full speed at full incline on a treadmill. So instead of focusing on my dreaming, I was thinking about all the lessons that I'd learned over those 6 days, and the power of vision, and the why I was there, the power of determination, the power that we need to overcome our fears, and the power of vulnerability. Now, the third day of our climb was an especially grueling and rough day. Okay? We'd already been hiking over 12 hours, and we knew we were not going to make it to base camp before sundown. That meant that temperatures get to very uncomfortable levels, and if not for the light of our headlamps and the stars and our guide, Masu, it was so dark that we'd be done for. So at one point during one of our much-needed breaks, Sophie, who was my hiking partner that day, said, "Bertha, what's your plan B? You know, if you don't make it." And I looked at her and I said, "Sophie, I didn't bring one. I don't believe in plan Bs. If I don't make it, it's because I'm dead, and my family knows what to do with the body." I really had that conversation with my family because failure was not an option, because I knew what that would represent for Cibao. Any plan B people in here? Nobody will admit it now, right? Please rid yourself of plan Bs. To me, plan Bs are like prenuptial agreements. They are a precursor to failure. It's hard to get anywhere when you have something to fall back on. You got to burn the ships. I know we've all heard of that analogy. When we're on a mission to succeed, we need to be determined to follow through at any cost. Failure is not an option. That has to be the attitude at all times. We must practice stick-to-itiveness. Can't believe that even came out. Practiced it. Doesn't come out. But we must really be committed to our dreams and our goals in order to achieve what we need to achieve. Og Mandino, one of my favorite authors, said, "I can accomplish any dream as long as I have determination by my side." It's interesting because people would always ask me as I was getting ready for the climb, "Aren't you scared?" Now, I'm one of those people who subscribes to the notion, like Eleanor Roosevelt always said, to do something every day that scares you. So I don't give in to fear. To me, fear is the opposite of faith. And if there's one thing I always pray for an abundance of, is faith. I'm going to tell you a little thing about fear that a lot of people don't know. You know, we're only born with 2 fears. Do you know that? The fear of falling and the fear of loud noises. That's it. Everything else is in here. And I'm going to let you in on a little secret. It's only in here until we dare to face it. Every fear has an expiration date, and they cease to exist as soon as you dare to face them. You know, my mom is afraid of the dark. Even at 85 years old, nobody tell her I said that. We got to edit that out of the video. She's still afraid of the dark. So when I was a little baby and I had just been potty trained, I'd have to get up and go to the bathroom in the middle of the night. But that meant traversing a long hallway in the dark because we lived in a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom apartment, and there were 8 of us. So if you turned on that hall light, everybody would wake up. So she'd look at me and she'd look at the hallway and she'd say, "Listen, go ahead. God is with you." And I took her word for it, and I'd go do my business and come back to bed. It was the greatest gift she could have ever given me. Because now when I'm off to go flying or skydiving or mountain climbing or on some mission trip to a far-off land on my own, she says, "Aren't you scared?" And I say, "No, because God is with me." And thank you. Fear is an illusion, ladies. It is a lie. And it only exists in here until we dare to face it. I want to share a story about one of my first clients that I had when I began adventure coaching. And as an adventure coach, one of the first things that I do is get people to face their fears. You get them out of their comfort zone, and the rest is really, really easy. So I'm going to share a story about Marie, and she won't mind me sharing that story because it's not her real name. Marie came to me for coaching because she described it as being stuck in quicksand. She'd just gotten out of a toxic relationship of 10 years with not much to show for it but 100 extra pounds, 2 kids, and a house she could no longer afford. So Marie felt like she just couldn't get any traction, and she came to me for coaching. And we'd been coaching for a little bit. So the county fair was in town, and in Miami it's the youth fair. So I said, listen, let's just go to the fair, grab Michael, that's her little one, and we'll just go blow off some steam. We'll get a group of girls. And she said, I don't go to the fair. And I said, why? She goes, because I don't ride anything. And I said, why? And she said, because I'm afraid of heights. Here's a hint, ladies, never tell an adventure coach that you are afraid of heights, ever. So for our next session, we met at our regular Starbucks, and I told her to meet me there at 5 a.m. on a Saturday morning. And she showed up. It's crazy. She showed up. So I got her in my car, and we drove to a little town named Clewiston, about an hour and a half from where we used to meet. And we park at Florida Air Ridge Park. And I don't expect you to know, but Florida Air Ridge Park is a hand gliding air park. So we park, and she looks at me, and I look at her, and her face gets beet red, and she says, what are we doing here? And I said, listen, breathe. Your flight is paid for, but you don't have to do it. I'm not going to force you to do it. I'm going to go. I'd gone several times, and you can just stay down here and take pictures of me. But you know what? As the minutes passed, she built up the courage to go hang gliding. And she was in the air at 1,000 feet for 11 minutes. When she came down, I remember like it was yesterday, her telling me, if I told my parents and my kids what I just did, they would never believe me. I said, actually, they will. Because I had them film the entire flight. And you have enough pictures there to remind yourself constantly that fear is only living in here. Her life changed in a way that I can't, it's a completely different person. She's a completely different person today. Had nothing to do with me, even though she gives me the credit. The fact that she got into that papalot, as we call it, and took that flight, she understood that a lot of the other lies she had been telling herself for years were just that. They were lies. And it changed everything for her. Fear is an illusion. And I promise you that there is nothing more empowering than facing your fears. Because I guarantee you that when Kirsten had to take the steps that she took that we heard about earlier today, there was a fear factor, I'm sure. But you know what? You faced it. Because now you can empower other people to take whatever steps are necessary, and you can support them along the way. And I thank you for sharing your story today. Fear is an illusion. So I mentioned earlier that the second most uncomfortable I had ever been in was that mountain. And I'll be honest, it was nothing compared to how uncomfortable I was one day standing in front of the mirror and not even recognizing the woman looking back at me. I'd been working too many hours in a successful business, which I loved, but I knew I wasn't making the impact I could be making. I was in the typical staleness of a 25-year marriage then, which neither of us were paying much attention to. We'd raised 2 amazing children who were grown and living their own lives. We were caring for our elderly mothers. I was full of empty. I was crawling out of my own skin, and that face staring back at me was screaming, "Do something about it!" What I love most about that level of uncomfortability and vulnerability and nakedness is that that uneasiness was the catalyst that helped me to grow and change and dare to live my life the way I wanted to live my life. The life that I knew I deserved. Did you hear those words? Repeat after me. I deserve it. I deserve it.
I deserve it.
Please use those words often, because you do. We all do. And it is important to remind ourselves every chance that we get. Now, I don't say this from a place of conceit or feeling of entitlement, but the older I get, the more I realize in the importance of believing in better for ourselves. And as most over 50 postmenopausal grandmas out there, we are just getting started. Boom. But you know what? Change sucks ass. And change hurts. And change is uncomfortable. But change is necessary. And I share this story in my book about this man who goes out for lunch. It's a beautiful day, and he opts for having lunch at a park. He's sitting on a park bench eating his sandwich, and he notices a chrysalis dangling from a tree branch. And he gets up, and upon closer inspection, he notices that there's a little slit starting to form. And there's a struggle going on inside. So he takes the tip of his pen and he opens the slit all the way down to help the butterfly along, sits down, waiting for the butterfly to emerge and offer its gratitude. A little more shaking in there, and a few minutes later, the butterfly does just that, makes its way out, and it falls to the ground and dies. The man is shocked. Because what he didn't understand was that in its struggle to break free, that butterfly gains its strength to fly. Change sucks ass. Change is uncomfortable. Change hurts. But in that struggle to change, to become who we are destined to become, is where we get the power to live to our full potential. Cynthia Ocelli said, "For a seed to reach its greatest expression, it must come completely undone. Its shell cracks, the insides come out, and everything changes. To someone who doesn't understand growth, it looks like total destruction." And I'll be honest with you, on that mountain, I embraced what it felt like to come completely undone. And I want to take you back to that mountain for just a moment. Because just when we thought we couldn't take another step from the concrete-like heaviness in our boots and the burning in our quads and the lack of oxygen in our lungs, we reached the sign signaling we'd arrived at Uhuru Peak, 19,341 feet above sea level. There we were, at the peak of the highest freestanding mountain on Earth, where I was standing at the roof of Africa, fulfilling a promise I'd made to a young Maasai boy named Sipao that I would climb that mountain to help him climb out of poverty. That day, I was supposed to change his life, and he ended up changing mine. The most beautiful and fastest path to success is to be in the service of others. The moment that anyone here who's in business for themselves changes their focus from making money to making an impact, your business will change for the better, I promise you. You're going to love Mondays like you have never loved Mondays before. I don't know how to describe that feeling when we reach the summit, but it must feel like when that butterfly, after that struggle, finally emerges and lives out its destiny. It must feel like when that first little sprout of a tree breaks through the ground after that seed has come completely undone. It feels like when we as women and mothers and daughters and sisters and friends allow ourselves to become that badass, amazing version of ourselves that we are destined to be. I want to encourage you to embrace the becoming, because I'm not going to tell you it's going to be easy, but I am going to tell you that it's going to be worth it. You are worthy. You are more than enough, and you are amazing. And thank you for today, all of you.